Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, unemployment is rising in Canada, and this week calls from Pierre Poilievre and David Eby to either scrap or reform Canada's temporary foreign worker program, saying it shuts out young local workers and is subject to fraud. We'll talk to Jobs Minister Ravi Kahlon, and we'll ask you what should happen to the TFW program. Plus, we'll talk about the wildfires and the smoke that has blanketed much of the province this week. We're asking you, how is the air quality affecting you? We'll talk to a health researcher. That's after 12:30. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us. We're live on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, live streaming as well on YouTube and on TikTok. And you can call us now. What do you think should happen to the temporary foreign worker program? You can hit pound 690 or dial 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca or leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Well, BC Premier David Eby is echoing federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in calling for the end of the temporary foreign worker program. Eby spoke yesterday in Surrey, and he said the program is not working and needs major reforms or should be cancelled. We're taking your calls again. What do you think should happen to the TFW program? You can give us a call now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Well, joining me now is the Jobs and Economic Growth Minister, Ravi Kahlon. Good afternoon, Minister.
Good afternoon, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Why is the Premier calling for either major changes or altogether the cancellation of the temporary foreign workers program now?
Well, we've been expressing this concern to the federal government for over 3 years. When I first became the Minister of Housing, I had sent a letter to the federal Minister of Immigration at the time saying that we need to relook at not only the temporary foreign worker program, but also other programs and immigration streams and provincial nominee program across the country. And the challenges that we see in our communities are a reflection of that. I'll give you a few examples. One, we have, of course, a need for temporary foreign workers in agriculture, in some smaller communities where it's hard to get access, the talent you need for your business. But there's a lot of employers that have now essentially built their entire business plans on temporary foreign workers, where they put up postings and they don't really try to hire somebody locally, and they're just trying to get someone and they can pay them a lower wage. We also have the LMIA system, which lets employers post jobs. If nobody applies, then they can fast track somebody for immigration to be able to do that. Now, it gets used in a proper way a lot of the time, but we've also heard way too many cases of fraud where people are being charged in another country. The employers are being paid for the posting, and quite frankly, there's exploitation happening in the system. And so what the Premier is expressing, and what we've been expressing for some time, is that we need to have all the provinces at the table, and we need to have a conversation about how we get the right levels of immigration, how we structure the provincial nominee program so that we can get the right talent that we need for the right type of employment. And then if we're going to have temporary foreign worker programs, that it's done in a way that addresses the challenges we have, but also prioritizes immigration. If a person is good enough to come and work here, we believe that we should have a pathway for immigration for those individuals so they can make sure that they can, raise their families here and coach the local hockey team. So that is what the Premier has expressed to the federal government. And what we've said is that, Prime Minister Carney's actually made some good moves recently coming in. We want to be at the table to help address that challenge. And if the premiers want to come together and make some advice to the federal government, then I think that's a positive thing.
You mentioned, smaller communities perhaps that and certain industries that would be at a greater need for temporary foreign workers. We did hear from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business pretty swiftly yesterday in response to Premier Eby's comments, calling them misguided. And they said that it is those small businesses, especially in rural and remote areas, that rely on this program to keep the doors open, because those jobs, there just aren't British Columbians there locally who will take them. So what would be the impact on businesses who say we can't find local people in BC to take on these jobs?
Well, we have no disagreement with small rural communities that are having a tough time with employment-related shortages or in agriculture. That's not the issue. The issue is
Minister Kahlon? Okay, our connection has paused with Minister Kahlon, unfortunately, so we'll try and fix that for you. Would love to continue this conversation with the minister, certainly, and have a few more questions for him. This is BC Today here on CBC, and we are taking your calls as well. We'll hear from an immigration consultant in a few minutes, too, but we'd love to hear from the minister further, so we are fixing that connection with Ravi Kahlon right now, taking your calls as well. What do you think should happen to the TFW program? 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Watching your comments as well on our TikTok and on email, bctoday@cbc.ca. Justin is calling us from Victoria. Yeah, what are your thoughts on the temporary foreign worker program and what should happen to it, Justin?
Hey, Michelle, how are you today?
I am just fine. Thanks for calling in.
Excellent. I think this program is an exceptional program when in need. When there's an issue, we throw money at it and, try to succeed through it. But as soon as your economy starts to slow down, you need to start clawing stuff like this back, right? So, as well as like the firearms things and stuff like that, you should have to be in this province or country for a certain amount of time before you're eligible to do these kind of things. Like, now you see so many of immigrants coming in and doing the firearms course. Like,
okay.
I think they should be holding off on lots of stuff like that, right?
Okay, let's just focus on the workers program.
You should be here.
Yeah,
and
you
Justin, should be here to try to make it anyway, right? And then get some help,
Yeah, and we're seeing unemployment numbers today, showing that an increase to more than 7%, 7.1%. So. Is that what you're saying? That, okay, now we are looking at unemployment higher among younger people?
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying, right? Is if you're bringing in people who are poor, people who are broke, then, yeah, you're going to have to fend for them and pay for them, right? But if you're bringing in people who have monies, per se, and can make it, like, why should they come into our country and then reap the rewards instantly is what I mean, right? That's what I'm saying. So I understand we need workers, but there's got to be like some kind of a catch to it too, instead of just handing out billions upon billions of free money, right?
Okay.
And like you say, it is very lucrative as well, right? So there is that too, right?
In terms of the industry around it. Okay, Justin, thank you very much for the call from
thank
Victoria. Bye-bye. Gordon is up next at 100 Mile House now. Hi, Gordon.
Hello there.
Hi, what are your thoughts on what should happen to the temporary foreign worker program?
Well, I wouldn't like to see it canceled. I would like to see it expanded, frankly. I work at an A&W where I have worked for many years, and there has to be like maybe 85% of our employee base is from the Philippines, temporary or not, maybe not so temporary foreign workers. Honestly, the best people I've ever worked with, so motivated, so good at their jobs, and let's be clear here, the option they're saying is we're going to have Canadian kids take over those jobs. Guess what? That means kids from high school who are not motivated and are only waiting until they can take on a job in trade school, which is fine. But, I mean, we even had one girl who didn't even make a whole pay period because she found out she was going to have to clean the washrooms. And, I mean, how are we going to they're building a McDonald's in my town right now. It is not constructed yet, and I have no idea how they're going to hire anybody if we do not do this. Okay. This is literally, we're immigrants. Unless you walked here or took a boat here 10,000 years ago, you're an immigrant. This is how my family got here 200 years ago. It was originally meant to be a path to citizenship. And, I literally heard in the throne speech that they were going to curtail this program. I think this is, idiocy to be curtailing it or trying to get rid of it. Okay. I think that the NDP is being pushed to the right by the right.
Gordon, thank you for the call from 100 Mile House. And we do have our connection back up now with Jobs and Economic Growth Minister Ravi Kahlon. He's on the phone now. Hi again, Minister.
Hi, Michelle. So sorry for that.
No worries at all. Glad you're back with us. I want to ask you, we've just had a couple of comments here. Someone saying, the workers that he works with at the A&W at 100 Mile House, you wouldn't find young people to fill those jobs, or you would have young people who are about to go to school. So what I'm wondering is, when we're looking at the unemployment numbers growing to 7.1%, it's been climbing, is there a direct link between those unemployment numbers, rising unemployment rates, and temporary foreign workers? I know the rhetoric points to that, but is there evidence of that jobs are actually not going to young people because of temporary foreign workers?
No, this is not about blaming temporary foreign workers. A lot of the folks that are working came through because the systems have built that way. And so there should be no blame to these young people in particular that are working. And some of them face, a huge amount of racism. You talk to people who are working at even Save On Foods, the number one concern they have is the amount of racism they face from people day to day. But the challenge that we're dealing with here is how do you align the employment you have and make sure that the people locally have opportunities to get that? And, the caller before came on and said, he's from a small town. They don't have people. I get it. No problem. If you don't have the people, it makes sense. But if you have employers here in Metro Vancouver, where we're at 12% unemployment rate, or in some parts of the interior where unemployment is, 10% plus, then we surely got to find ways to make sure locals have the opportunity. And, just to comment on the other caller that called, Michelle, I'll just say that it's vitally important that we do have a pathway for people to get citizenship. That position has not changed. Having people come temporarily just to work when there's people locally that have, need access to employment, we should be prioritizing local people to be able to take those opportunities.
Okay, you've pointed to the issues around fraud. You've pointed to some industries and areas where it would still be beneficial. So it sounds like, okay, there are issues with the program itself. Why call for its cancellation altogether? Why is that on the table?
Well, because it's been years of us asking for the federal government to make changes to these programs. Not only the temporary foreign program, but other programs as well. And so we are at a point of frustration where we're saying, if you're not going to make the reforms necessary, then you're going to have to do something else. But we prefer to be at the table, as the Premier said in his comments yesterday. We want to be at the table. We're prepared to actually lead a table amongst all provinces to have this conversation, work with the federal government. Again, they've made some good moves recently to realign. We want to see a system that works. But fundamentally, we believe if a person is good enough to come here and work, they should have a pathway to citizenship, just like my parents came, just like other people have come here to this country. We should be able to create that fair pathway. And temporary foreign worker programs should be used only in cases where there's a huge necessity. And what we feel is it's been expanded. And it's not only that, we've been having issues around the provincial nominee program, which the federal government cut by 50%, which was the only tool we had to make sure we had the right skills for the employment opportunities we need. So it's a more of a holistic piece, Michelle, that we need to address. And hopefully this is the start of a conversation between the provinces and the federal government.
Minister, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and apologies for the disconnection.
Glad to have you back. Ravi Kahlon, BC's Minister for Jobs and Economic Growth, asking you what should happen to the temporary foreign worker program. A couple more callers right now before we go to our next guest. Hillary is on the line in Victoria. Hi, Hillary. What do you think should happen to this program?
Hi, thanks for chatting with me. I definitely think we need some overhaul here, not only, of course, because of the abuses, but also I heard yesterday on CBC that Tim Hortons, they were saying about 5% of their workforce is temporary foreign workers, which I looked up is about 5,000 people across the country. And this is a highly, highly profitable company. They're obviously using temporary foreign workers. I'm sure there's certain situations where they can't find local workers, but I have no doubt they're using it to pay people less. And that's just, we should not be having systems in our Canadian government where very profitable companies can get away with paying people less than market rates for, students who are looking for work, for any other unemployed person looking for work. So yes, definitely think we need an overhaul.
Hillary, thank you so much for calling in. Gabrielle, take care. Gabrielle is next now in Surrey. Hi, Gabrielle.
Hi, my name's Gabrielle. I'm working in agriculture, so I have a lot of experience working in the old form of the temporary foreign worker program, which is to help farmers get people that can work in these jobs that often locals don't apply for, things like working on a dairy farm, starter jobs. And I feel strongly that people who come to do these jobs, they should have opportunity to move up, but I do understand why it was needed for agriculture. And I have a lot of friends who've, come to the country through the program, moved on to get an LMIA, and hopefully have a future, even through agriculture basic jobs.
Okay, Gabrielle, just for people listening, can you just describe again what LMIA refers to?
So LMIA is, as I understand it, is the next step. It's to look to have people coming in for more permanent jobs. So you're, as an employer, more responsible. The temporary foreign worker program, in my experience on agricultural setup, is often an 8-month contract where a person comes in. They're under the responsibility of the employer, the farmer, for housing, making sure that they have medical care, some of the basics, because they're not permanently staying in Canada. So the farmer often will have a property that has enough space to house people. I got a little shocked when I heard that corporations were hiring through the foreign worker program, like fast food chains and stuff. I started thinking as a farmer, well, is it the same requirements that we have as farmers to make sure our employees have housing, have health care? How does this work for like a big store like Canadian Tire to have a foreign worker program? I started getting nervous also about labor contractors using it. People coming without many language skills, being shuffled around. I think there's a huge opportunity for AIR. I know in the agricultural sector, we work closely with the embassies to make sure that our employees are well cared for if they are through the foreign worker program. I work on a farm where we don't actually have anyone on that program currently. Okay. Everyone's become a citizen and brought their families.
Gabrielle, I'm just going to jump in now because we have to go to our guest, but thank you very much for sharing that, especially from your perspective working in agriculture. Good to hear from you. Thank you. That's Gabrielle in Surrey. For more on this, we have reached Neera Agnihotri. She's an immigration consultant based in Surrey. Good afternoon, Neera. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon.
Well, you hear all this discussion around the temporary foreign worker program. What do you think should happen with it?
You know what? The temporary foreign worker program has been around for a very long time, and it's a necessity. It is not something that we want. It's a need for Canada, just to fill in those labor shortages. Where that was the original purpose of this program, is to fill a labor need, a labor shortage within our economy, to make sure that the companies, the employers have the workers required to do what they need to do.
But is it broken? Does it have problems right now, though?
It's completely broken. It is broken. It is. It's been broken for a little while now, and unfortunately, the good players are also suffering with the bad players. And we're here to say that yes, reform is required. The federal government really needs to step up the game to figure out how do we reform this? How do we recalibrate with what is happening with all of this coming into media view? Everybody is speaking about it. Everybody is saying, wait a minute, we have such a high unemployment rate. And one of the speakers that spoke earlier stated that, that Tim Hortons, most of the labor force is TFWs. They may or may not have been, but they are the ones that will take these jobs. We look in the construction industry. We're looking at the healthcare industries. We're looking at, the STEM industries where there is such a high demand and need for these workers because employers are unable to fill these labor shortages. But is it being misused? It's being misused in many ways, in so many different ways, where I think the government, as the minister had stated, we've come to the table to say, this is what's happening. People are paying for these jobs. People are paying to come into Canada. Now, if we think about the temporary foreign worker or a temporary resident coming into Canada, it is for a better life. They're coming here not just to work in labor class, but the working conditions in Canada should be better than their conditions. The wages are better. And in that, they will look at whatever means it takes to get into Canada again for a better life. So they're not to blame. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so no, and thank you for describing that and explaining what's behind it. What we're hearing from the Prime Minister is he won't scrap the program, but will review it. So given those issues that you've raised, what kind of changes would you like to see made then?
You know what? We need some stricter employer vetting. Now, a numbered company, what I stated yesterday, how did they get LMIs approved? There's no company. There's no company, but they have approvals. What is the officer, ESDC, doing to vet these companies to ensure that, first of all, is there an actual company? And if there is an actual company, what is the need? We're in the world of AI right now. There's so many things that can be done to, shortlist certain things. We have the internet. We have ways of finding out, is this a legitimate business, right? So we have to look at some digital tracking and transparency in these programs. What about random checks and audits, inspections? If you've been approved, if an employer has been approved for a labor market impact assessment to hire a temporary foreign worker, they can show up at this workplace to say, oh, is this person working there? Are they working in the ability or in the capacity or the job that they have been offered? What are their working conditions like? Okay. Is the employer complying with the conditions imposed with the LMIA? We look at, any mechanisms for the worker to report. The worker should not be afraid. They should not be afraid to report any sort of abuse.
Okay.
They should, so we need to have some webinars, some seminars in worker rights, student rights.
Neera, my apologies for jumping in. I want to thank you for your time. I just have to pause now for a TV break, but really appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Neera Agnihotri is an immigration consultant based in Surrey. And I just want to clarify, LMIA stands for Labor Market Impact Assessment. This is a document that employers are required to fill in order to hire a foreign worker to demonstrate that they have not been able to find a Canadian citizen or permanent resident to fill that job. Let's take another call here. Roman in Nanaimo. Hi, what are your thoughts on the TFW program?
Well, I'm not speaking for or against it at this time, because as much passion as I've heard from any of the callers that have called before me have displayed, I've heard very little to no metrics except for your last expert that spoke on immigration. And I'd like to see some better results on what is the start of the program, how is it adhered to its intentions, has it satisfied what its intention was? Can it be overhauled to fulfill that, or can it be moved into something else? And part of this equation also, I think, should be, rather than just focusing on changing the program, how are we better supporting our local youth to get into career-minded sort of ways and means of actually getting into society with a good running start, rather than just taking what we can from other places like the TFW. We need metrics.
Metrics in the discussion as well, that data to show the impacts. Roman, good to hear from you. Thanks so much for calling in. Haven't heard from Roman in a while. Good to hear from you. We have an email from Marjorie who writes, the only reason the TFW program exists is that employers are not able to get Canadian workers to do these sorts of work. Yes, reform the program so that abuses are rooted out, but you have to figure out how to get Canadians to do this work before you cancel the program. Marjorie, thank you. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email address. Send us your thoughts. It's 12:30 now. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks for being with us. We do have more calls on what should happen to the temporary foreign worker program. So we'll go to them. A few more calls to go through after this CBC News update. And we'll ask you as well. We're going to get an update on the wildfires around Anahim Lake, the wildfire that's impacting the Coquihalla Highway as well from Hope to Merritt. And we'll talk to a health sciences expert about the impact of air quality, of poor air quality on us. We'll ask you how you're coping this week too. So that's all coming up after the CBC News update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Some good news for people driving between the South Coast and the interior. The Coquihalla Highway has just reopened. It had been closed due to a nearby wildfire. The province says it could be shut down again with minimal notice. Meanwhile, police say the Trans-Canada will stay closed just south of Yale for the balance of the day following a serious crash this morning. More than 500 people have been ordered to leave their homes due to wildfires in the Caribou. Most of the evacuees are in areas close to Highway 20 and east of Bella Coola. Evacuees are making their way to an emergency operations center at the Caribou Rec Center in Williams Lake. And BC Labour Minister Jennifer Whiteside has appointed Vince Reddy as special mediator in the long-running transit strike in the Cowichan Valley. The workers have been off the job for almost 7 months. Whiteside says the strike has been deeply disruptive to people who rely on transit service. And now the forecast on the North Coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 16, mainly sunny and hazy in the Peace with highs in the mid-20s. In the central interior, including Prince George, highs getting close to 30 degrees with sunshine and haze this afternoon. Sunny and hazy with highs around 28 in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, widespread smoke with a high of 28 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, hazy and smoky this afternoon with highs around 27. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television. We're live streaming too on YouTube and CBC BC. You're joining us on TikTok. Thanks for being there. Taking your comments on what do you think should happen with a temporary foreign workers program. A call from Premier David Eby, and you heard Jobs Minister Ravi Kahlon speaking today as well, that the program needs a major overhaul or actually scrapped. The federal Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, also speaking to that and giving that call as well earlier this week. We heard from the Prime Minister today saying that that program is needed but does need some changes. So we're asking you, what do you think should happen with it? Lots of calls still on the line. Gabrielle is in Surrey. What do you think, Gabrielle? My apologies. I think Gabrielle is off the line now, and I think we did hear from her earlier. Reg at Dawson Creek. Hi, Reg.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Good afternoon. What do you think should happen with the TFW program?
Well, I've not participated directly in the TFL program, but I do pull in workers from other youth, I would say mostly youth support programs internationally. In the ag sector, most farmers would know about woofing and Workaway and several programs where young people want to come and work and do seasonal things for extended periods of time. And I find that in the young workers that I've had, their accommodation factor is almost number one. The actual wage price is almost second, and the experience that goes with it in the mentorship. So my hope is that the minister, I agree that it shouldn't form the fundamental part of a business plan. I'm a startup in the berry operation, and I want to be able to do my harvesting regularly. I think we need the strategic perspective. The BC government did a labor market gap analysis, and back in 23-24. So we can study things till we're blue in the face, but I think if we actually take a look within a strategic area, what are the range of things, and what's the fundamental thing? If we've got available accommodation, like there's work camps that are vacant. I mean, we got to pull people together, First Nations, and we can pull the accommodation piece, and then you got all of a sudden half of the issue resolved. So I think we need to be strategic and on a regional day. That's what I have to say about it.
Okay, focused. Reg, thank you very much. Good to hear your perspective with a small berry operation. We have a caller at Big White, and Melon is joining us. Hi there, Melon.
Hi there. Well, home is Big White. I work as a temporary foreign worker and a skilled worker overseas because my industry is staffed with a lot of amazing people that are on LMIA visas. However, it means that my employers have to choose between someone that has a requirement to make hours and me, a Canadian citizen that doesn't, and they'll choose those workers over me. They have to because they need to fill that requirement. But that means that I stopped working for Canadian employers full time 10 years ago. and I work overseas because I can't make a living in my industry in Canada.
Oh, but you're back in BC now.
I'm in BC temporarily, and I'll leave again when the season starts, when seasonal work is back.
That's really interesting. Are you, and do you fall in the young person category, Melon?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay.
I have more skill. I have more years. I have more experience. I have higher certification level. I'm very good at my job. I train the people that are working in these resorts. I'm 27 years into the industry, and facing the fact that I can't make a living in my country.
And this is because of the hours requirements. What do you think should change then about the TFW program, or should it be scrapped?
Honestly, I think my opinion would go towards looking at, especially when we're looking at we'll be looking at the labor requirements in terms of, if there's a 20-hour-a-week requirement for foreign workers, then that has to be filled for everyone. And maybe that's an hourly top-up, or we're usually not paid for the hours that we show up. There's a couple of really nice employers, but housing is difficult in those locations. I think it's more of if there needs to be minimum hours, or hours that are paid for when you are at work rather than just when you are working.
Okay. Melon, I'm glad to hear from you. Really good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Go ahead.
That's all my anecdotal experience. You've got some great experts on to talk about the temporary foreign worker program, and it's great to hear from people that are well staffed by it. But this is an experience from a skilled worker who works temporarily in other countries. It
is, and it's good to have that as part of the conversation. So I'm really glad you called. Thanks, Melon.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Have a great day.
You too. That's Melon calling us from Big White. Neera Agnihotri has been listening in, an immigration consultant based in Surrey. You heard some of the issues there raised by Melon. What did you think?
So this is what we're sitting at. Our Canadians, and I have children also in the working age now, in their mid-20s, where they're unable to find that skilled work where they want to be. But now, when we talk about the labor market impact assessment, and one of the callers had said earlier that it's employers are using this to pay temporary foreign workers less, but it's not the case. A labor market impact assessment can only be approved if you're willing to pay this employee the medium wage or higher.
So that's not happening. We hear that a lot, right?
No, this is not happening. No. So the temporary foreign worker program will only approve a labor market impact assessment. So we have 3 wage categories as consultants that we look at. We have low, medium, and high. And Canada breaks up into regions. So BC Lower Mainland, let's just say for front counter attendant, we're talking about Tim Hortons. Don't quote me on this. Let's say the low wage is minimum wage, which is $17.65. Medium wage is $21, and the high is $30. The temporary foreign worker, if there's a labor market impact assessment, has to be paid the $21 or higher, cannot be lower than the medium wage. They will not assess a labor market impact at the low to medium. It can be only assessed medium to higher. So they are getting paid that. So my thing is, okay, well, if they're being offered a higher wage than minimum wage at some point in time, why is it that Canadians are not being hired? Why are Canadians not applying to these positions? If there is a job posting, and the job posting is not of the low wage, it's of medium or higher, Canadians have the opportunity to apply. And this is where then we bring in the misuse of this program. Is the employer targeting only the temporary foreign worker that they want to hire, or temporary foreign workers, and not even looking at the resumes that are coming in from Canadians? But now what Job Bank has done, one of the mandatory sites that you have to advertise, it is the Job Bank. And Job Bank has now made it accessible that Canadians will be the only ones that are allowed to apply for the first 30 days. It's not open to anybody else but Canadians and permanent residents. And now Job Bank can also see the resumes that have been sent in. And then we have a star following. 3 stars, 4 stars, 5 stars. So it can't be that I just say, oh, 5 Canadians applied, they didn't qualify. But now ESDC is able to see the 5 resumes that came in. Were they matched? It was a job match there. Were they at 5 stars? Was
Right.
it 50% or more?
So it
So all
sounds like, my apologies just for time, it sounds like there is a need for and some steps toward greater scrutiny of
exactly
what's
exactly.
the efforts being made locally.
Because our Canadians should not be leaving the country to go apply and work outside the country where they're not able to make that living in Canada. We should take care of our Canadians and permanent residents first and foremost. And then, of course, when the need is there, there is a huge demand for TF. Canada works and lives on immigration. We
Okay.
are a country that is diverse and that needs immigration. But again, let's take care of the Canadians first. And I always say that born Canadian, being Canadian, Canadian children, we definitely have to scrutinize this program a little bit more.
Neera, good to have you. Thank you so much for
Thanks so
lending
much.
us your thoughts on this and expertise. That's Neera Agnihotri, immigration consultant in Surrey. It's 12:41. Let's go through some of your emails now. This is about yesterday's segment around exclusion of students with disabilities. And Suzanne wrote us, my daughter was born with a lot of medical challenges, as well as with Down syndrome. However, in kindergarten, we managed to teach her in kindergarten and how to spell her own name, her street address. She was able to learn to swim, ride a bike, plays piano. However, once she got to high school, she's not included. Huge praise to her teachers. They were all wonderful, but the system has never supported those with disabilities adequately. Where was her classroom in high school? In the basement, at the far back of the school. Just why? M writes, I'm a teacher who just retired. One factor in the timing of my retirement was the increased needs of students and families with simultaneous decreases in supports. Teachers are being forced to make hard choices. I did not take my grade 2-3 class on any field trips last year because I couldn't ensure everyone's safety off-site. So in order to not exclude anyone, all of my students missed the opportunity. David Eby needs to find a way to provide the staffing for educational assistants and school counselors promised in the last election. It's the future put at risk otherwise. Thanks for your emails. We did receive a statement from the Education Ministry saying expanding EAs in schools is one of the minister's mandate priorities. It says almost 80% of K-3 classes in BC already have EA support, but the ministry is exploring ways to support hiring more EAs. It's developing new guidelines as well for individual education plans and new resources to support collaboration between families and school staff. They say that's coming this school year. And in June of last year, the ministry released an inclusive childcare strategy. So that from the Ministry of Education and Childcare. Taking your thoughts on anything you hear on the show as well, bctoday@cbc.ca. (12:44) now, and this is BC Today. We turn to the wildfire situation in our province right now. A slew of evacuation orders were issued in central BC due to a wildfire burning along Highway 20, and it moved closer to homes overnight. The Caribou Regional District and the Okachko First Nation have issued orders in Nimco Lake, Charlotte Lake, and Anahim Lake, which is home to more than 1,500 residents. You're being told to travel east along Highway 20 to Williams Lake, and an emergency service center is set up at the Caribou Memorial Recreation Complex. Earlier this week, the Beef Trail Creek wildfire burning north of the highway already prompted an evacuation north of Anahim Lake. And a travel advisory does remain in place for a section of Highway 20 from Anahim Lake going west to Bella Coola. Drive BC says there is limited visibility from wildfire smoke and conditions may change without notice. You can find an interactive map of the evacuation zones on the Caribou Regional District website. And for more information, you can go to our website. We have one that has a low bandwidth if you're running low on data, and that's cbc.ca/light with light spelled Lite. Let's take you now to Hope. As you just heard in the 12:30 news update, the Coquihalla Highway between Hope and Merritt has reopened. It was closed for 2 days because of the out-of-control Mine Creek wildfire. The Ministry of Transportation says the highway is being closely monitored and could close again with little warning due to the fire's proximity. Drivers are being urged not to stop in the fire zone and to expect intermittent lane closures as crews assess roadside damage. And keep note as well that visibility in the area remains poor because of wildfire smoke, and cell phone coverage is also down along sections of the route. But again, the Coquihalla Highway open now between Hope and Merritt. It was closed for a couple of days because of that Mine Creek wildfire. Our CBC reporter Johna Baylon is around Hope right now. She's been there all day. Hi, Johna. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Michelle. Thank you for having us. We're right here at Hope, as you said.
Yeah. What is the latest? This is very new, just now, the Coquihalla Highway reopening. But tell us what is the latest with the wildfire that did cause that closure for 2 days?
That's right, Michelle. So the smoke you're seeing over here and the wildfire that caused the closure on the Coquihalla Highway is the mine to burn out. It's burning about 44 kilometers northeast from here in Hope. And as we know, that fire was discovered on Monday. It has since grown to 19,000 square kilometers. It has prompted evacuation orders and alerts for the area. The Fraser Valley Regional District has also declared a state of local emergency. Now, as you mentioned, Coquihalla Highway was closed for a bit there. It has reopened this noon. It could also close again, depending on conditions from that fire. Michelle?
Johna, I can see just how smoky it is behind you there. A bit of wind as well. From what I can tell, you're wearing a mask, which I'm glad to see. Tell me more about the air quality.
Yes, Michelle, it's pretty bad out here. It is hard to breathe, stay out here long enough. Your eyes will start to sting. We're all right. We have our masks on, but Environment Canada has issued air quality warnings for most of BC at this point. The worst air quality levels are here near Chilliwack and Hope. Folks, of course, are being asked to stay indoors, avoid the outdoors as much as possible, keep their windows and doors closed. You know, if you have air filters, do use them. If you start to experience symptoms from the smoke, do get medical help. But yes, to summarize, coming out here, you always see the mountains. The mountains cannot be seen today, not this morning. The smoke is pretty thick and heavy.
Well, thank you so much for being there for us, Johna, and you take care, okay? Thanks so much.
No problem. Thanks, Michelle.
CBC reporter Johna Baylon in Hope. And we are taking your calls right now. If you want to let us know how the air quality is affecting you, the wildfires have caused air quality statements. You heard about the Fraser Valley, Squamish, Whistler, and Smithers also forecast to have poor air quality today. Air quality statements all around BC except for Vancouver Island, the far north and coastal sections of the North and Central Sunshine Coast. Let us know, how is the air quality this week affecting you, and what are you doing to try and reduce its impact? Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. Watching your comments on TikTok as well. Well, Stephanie Cleland is a professor at Simon Fraser University's Faculty of Health Sciences. Thank you very much for joining us. Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
What kind of impact could that smoke that you saw with the Johna, that kind of smoky air and pollution, what kind of health impacts does that have?
Yeah, that's a great question. So smoke can cause a wide array of health effects. The key one that we see, at least in the immediate term, is respiratory effects, right? As you breathe in, it's going to affect your lungs, and that can be something as minor as just, a little bit of difficulty breathing, declined lung function, to things like an asthma exacerbation of COPD, or potentially going to the emergency room or being hospitalized for respiratory complications. So we know that it affects our lungs. It also affects our hearts. It can increase the risk of heart failure or heart attack, and similarly, maybe needing to go to the ED or going to the hospital for heart complications. And beyond that, we also have a little bit of evidence that it can even affect our cognitive performance, right? Smoke brain is something that people sometimes talk about, but there is some evidence that when it's smoky outside, your ability to focus, pay attention may also be affected.
What about long term?
So that's a great question. That's something a lot of us researchers are starting to look into. So most of the research today has focused on what we call short-term exposure. So a couple of days of exposure and what happens in the next few days following that. But now that smoke is becoming a more and more common feature of summers in places like BC, we're starting to try and understand not just what a couple days means, but what multiple seasons of wildfire smoke means. And the early evidence indicates that it, similarly to short-term exposure, isn't good for our health. So if you're exposed to multiple years of wildfire smoke exposure, it may increase the risk of potentially lung cancer, developing chronic lung disease, an array of other, more chronic conditions. And if you're pregnant during wildfire smoke season, it may increase the risk of birth complications like low birth weight or preterm birth.
So what can we do? My colleague Johna Baylon was wearing an N95 mask as she's reporting from Hope. What are some things that we can do?
Yeah, so the good news is we do have a lot of tools to reduce our exposure to wildfire smoke. So one of the best things to do is to reduce your time spent outside. Ideally, you can shelter indoors. If at home, close your windows, close your doors, run an air cleaner if you have one. If you don't have a commercial air cleaner, you can build a do-it-yourself air cleaner using a box fan, filter, and duct tape. So those are pretty affordable supplies. So having that air filter in your home can really help pull those particles out of your inside environment. Similarly, something else you can do is if you have to go outside, wear a N95 mask or something similar to that, because that's going to protect you from those hazardous particles that are in smoke. And if, at home you aren't able to really close your windows or doors, accessing a public space like a library or a community center that's likely going to have good air filtration and potentially air conditioning is a really good step you can take.
My guest is Stephanie Cleland, a professor at Simon Fraser University's Faculty of Health Sciences. And Doug is calling us from Vancouver Island to talk about air quality. Hi, Doug. What are you observing there?
Well, I'm in Whiskey Creek, basically west of Qualicum Beach. And when the sun comes up in the morning, it's red until 11 o'clock at least. And I'm looking right now east towards Qualicum Beach. I'm living in Whiskey Creek. It's smoky. It's not, you can't feel it in your lungs or whatever. It's not bother your breathing, but it's smoky. You can't see any blue anywhere.
Wow. Imagine that at Qualicum Beach, eh? Doug, thank you so much. Great to hear this report from you. Thanks for the call. It's interesting. He brought up the sun and even the moon at night. Can you explain what's behind that? I mean, when you go out, so you really do see just how red things are. Stephanie?
Yeah. So when we can kind of visibly see smoke, right, that often means there's a lot of smoke in the air. And the reason it's red and the reason it's kind of you can't see blue is because fine particulate matter, these teeny tiny particles, make up a large part of wildfire smoke. So when you have a lot of those particles in the air, right, that's going to change the lighting, that's going to kind of make it more difficult to see blue sky, to see things in the distance, right? You can kind of really visibly see the smoke. But something that's important is that wildfire smoke can pose a risk before you can even visibly see it. So I always recommend checking the local air quality, because even if you maybe can't visibly see it and the sun isn't super red, it still may be dangerous. So using the visual indicator is helpful, but it's also really good to check your local air quality to see what the measurements are reading.
Right. And, it's become almost a habit to check that now, that ACQI, that index, right? Air quality index. Can you tell us just, how we should be reading that? What are the numbers that are of concern?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The AQHI, the Air Quality Health Index, is a really useful tool. So the resource I always use is aqmap.ca. It's a map of all the air quality monitors across Canada, so you can really easily check your real-time local air quality. And it's color-coded by the AQHI. So we have blue, we have yellow, we have orange, we have red, right? And each of those colors is associated with a different type of health risk messaging. So when it's blue, that generally means the air quality is pretty okay, and you can go about things as usual. Once we get to more in the yellow zone, that's where people who are potentially more at risk, right? People with asthma, people with COPD, people with other chronic diseases, or older adults, pregnant women, or younger children should maybe start considering limiting their exposure. Then once we get more into the orange to red category, that's when the general population should likely start thinking about reducing their exposure, maybe rescheduling their outdoor run, kind of sheltering indoors if possible. And then if we get up into the purple zone, that means the air quality is really, really bad, and everybody should be taking as many precautions as possible. But it's a very useful tool to kind of understand what the potential risks are based on who you are, right? So the general population is a little bit different than someone who's at higher risk, and the AQHI can help you make those decisions.
You know, we actually have a physician in Vancouver who can bounce off of that as well, what you said in terms of reducing our activity outside. And Kevin is on the line now. Hi, Kevin. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for letting me call in.
Yeah. What did you want to say?
Well, the other thing I want to add, I think Dr. Cleland made some important points, but the important thing is when you're exercising, you're increasing your ventilation rate. So you're really increasing the amount of that pollution, that fine particulate matter that goes into your lungs. So it's something to really think about, especially when we have a big race, the Grand Fondo, coming up this weekend on Saturday, going through the Sea to Sky corridor. And the air quality up there is very, very bad. So that's what I think, and there's so much we still don't know about the long-term effects of these fine particulate matters.
Just what Stephanie was talking about. Thank you very much, Kevin, for the call. I have a minute here, but yeah, I mean, you're talking about the Grand Fondo. We're back at school as well, and I'm wondering what the metrics should be there in terms of perhaps rethinking these events.
So in terms of kind of rethinking, should we cancel recess today at an elementary school, or should we reschedule an outdoor event like the Grand Fondo? Those are really important questions that public health professionals are thinking about, is kind of at what level should we likely, decide to reschedule or cancel that event. And again, I think that's where we can use things like the AQHI, right? Think about the population. For elementary school, we're thinking about young children. They tend to be at higher risk. Our threshold might be a little bit lower for children at recess because we know that population may be more susceptible to the health risks of wildfire smoke. Similarly, with the Grand Fondo, we know people are going to be exercising. And as Kevin mentioned, right, if you're exercising, you're breathing in more air, which basically exposes you to more wildfire smoke and increases the risk of their health outcomes. So if it's an event and it's smoky and it's going to be outdoor exercise, similarly, our threshold might be a little bit different than if it's a different event or a different population. So I think those thresholds are important. We don't really have a hard line across them, but taking into consideration of what population is this event catering to, and what is the nature of the event? Is it exercise? Is it a social gathering? Is it something we can do in masks? Right, can help make those decisions. And really, the best goal is to try and protect those most at risk.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.